Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. My name is Brian Gorman, and I will be chairing the meeting. The meeting is video recorded by Westwood Media Center. If anyone else wishes to record the meeting, please identify yourself so the audience is aware. Seeing none. As a friendly reminder, please turn off your cell phone ringers. The meeting will be civil and all people will be treated respectfully. This includes no clapping, booing, or interruptions from the audience. In the event of a disruption, the chair will give a warning the first time, and if it occurs again, the individual will be requested to leave the meeting. The format of the meeting will be when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium to present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments. The board members will ask questions of the applicant. For public hearing items, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. Items that are not a public hearing, the opportunity for public comment will be at the discretion of the board. When it is time for the public comment period, the chair will call those wishing to speak to the podium to use the microphone. Once at the podium, please use the microphone. Please and identify yourself, stating your name and address for the record. Please direct all comments and questions to the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. And Abby, are there any changes to the agenda tonight besides the...
Yes, there's one change. Your second item on the agenda, that's a public hearing for the group home proposed at 230 High Street. This is the environmental impact design review.
Yep.
They request a continuance to your next meeting on Tuesday, March 17th at 7 p.m. They want to have more time to respond to staff comments before coming before you.
And do we need to make a motion to move that? Or
Yes, you
Or
should
we do that
vote. And so if anyone's here in the audience for that application, this is the notification of the next meeting will be March 17th in this room.
Okay. Dave, do you want to make the
I
motion?
will move that we continue that public hearing to Tuesday, March 17th, at 7 p.m. at 50 Carby Street, this location.
Right. And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So it's moved. And is that it for the changes?
The only other change is later on in the agenda, one of the select board articles, the one was a placeholder for High Street zoning that has been withdrawn.
Okay.
So if anyone's here just for that, you'll get to it later.
Okay. Great. So let's move on. So the first item on the agenda is agenda item number 1, Casa Loca, Mexican Cantina, University Station Development. It's a request for project-specific signage alternative pursuant to section 9.7.10.15 of the zoning bylaws for signage review. And the applicant's here? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Feder. I'm with ICL Imaging. We're a large format printer and sign manufacturer, and I'm representing Wellesley Restaurant Group, who's opening Casa Loca at 174 University Ave. We're requesting essentially signage on the east and west side of the building. They were going to forego signage on the front of the building because of how close to the street it is. There's a lot of shrubbery there, and the visibility wasn't very good. So to catch the traffic going east and west, we're requesting a raceway channel letter on the east side as well as on the west side. These are two-way channel letters, so when they're not lit, they'll appear black, but when they light up, they'll appear white. And that for the other. And the logo on this section is towards the back of the building, not right up at the street. So it'll be visible from further down the road.
Great.
Yeah, I think that
Excellent. Thank you.
covers it.
So I guess we can move to questions from the board. So Deb, do you have any questions?
I do. Abby, you're putting the right up that the west side sign was larger than typically allowed.
Actually, I checked with the building department. It's not the size, it's the number of signs. Because there's 3 signs. Two is allowed by right. 3, the number of signs is what has triggered this project-specific review.
So is that typical for the, I mean, I'm not sure that we have any signs down on any of the other restaurants that say things like eat or, is that typical for your restaurant?
So I'm the sign manufacturer, just going on what the owner requested. He's seen it on a bunch of buildings, and he really liked it, and he thought that Casa Loca didn't really tell people driving by, you can stop in here and have dinner. So I think that was his idea of getting eat on the side there, so that, it's more prominent and people driving up and down will know that they're serving food inside.
No, I just don't know if it goes with the area, but, your thoughts?
The lighting, how bright is it gonna be, or do we
It's
have a
gonna be
problem with that, or? No?
It's going to be, pretty much standard LED lighting inside. When it's lit up, it's going to be a little bit, it won't be as bright as you normally see because of the two-way vinyl, which essentially is black vinyl with holes all through it, so that when it lights up, your eyes sort of, it's an optical illusion. Your eyes will filter out the black when the light is bright. So it will be a little less bright than you would normally see with channel letters when it's lit up.
And Dave, do you have any questions?
I'm kind of curious about the eat sign. It's just why it does seem a little out of place. Like the other sign is really, it's nice, and name of the restaurant. It's obviously a Mexican restaurant, it seems like, but then it's just that big eat.
The Wellesley Restaurant Group owns a bunch of restaurants around, and I think they may have in other areas, have people say, oh, I saw you were here, I really didn't know what you were. So I think his idea was, just to make sure people know that, they can eat there.
And then I had a question regarding the coloring. So it'll be the dark color that you have there?
So when the raceways will all be painted to match the, the facade, but the actual letters themselves, when it's not lit, it'll appear black, and as soon as the light goes on, it'll appear white.
Okay.
It's more of an optical illusion because of the way our eyes filter out the black.
Okay.
So when it's not lit, it's going to look just like that. When it is lit, it's going to look like up in the top left there, Casa Loca and Eat. The returns, the sides on all of them will be black. And it's only light coming out of the face. We have no light coming out of the sides or the back either.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions or comments. Deb, do you have any
I
further?
just wondered if there's something else you could put there instead of eat. Just, what are the choices there? And, a picture or something, or some sort of a logo? You guys they don't have a logo?
Well, the Casa Loca is their logo. It was more like a graphic sort of thing. They
Yeah.
had not put that together. I think they kept it pretty simple. They did go through a bunch of different names too.
For the restaurant? Yeah.
There were a bunch of them around there. So
And then there are other board questions or comments? I don't know.
I just have a
Yeah.
question. I think, this is facing the parking lot?
correct. Yep.
So I think it's
So
in
it's
the other
facing-
signs facing University Station, right?
Yes.
The
correct,
Ave,
correct,
University Ave. So I think it's
The other
in
sign is
the
facing-
north and west side. I
correct.
think it's not the east side, I think it's the north side. Just
Not
wanted to clarify.
exactly. Up and down University.
Okay, yep, so I think this is the
Yeah.
north-facing sign.
Yes.
And they don't stay lit all night, right?
Whatever's allowed by town ordinance, I imagine it has to stay lit while they're open, and, obviously it'll have photo cells up there so that, it's not turned on when it's bright outside. But it's not gonna stay lit past when they're open.
I have any questions.
Bill?
No,
Abby, is there anything else you wanted to add to this? So this went through a review based on the standards for university?
Right, and just because it has the 3 signs, that
Yeah.
kicks it up to what we call a project-specific signage alternative. We do have this special section in the zoning bylaw for the University Ave Overlay District. So we've had a few of these at other locations in town where you look at it on a case-by-case basis. You've had it at Wegmans, at the bank right across the street, and then some overall signage, kind of directional signage for the whole core development area. A finding that the planning board has to make is that there's no negative safety impact when looking at these signs.
Okay, great, thank you. And are there any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none. So does somebody want to make a motion? Or unless there's any other questions for discussion?
Yeah, I will, so I don't think there's a safety issue. It seems like that, and I think that this, I'm not thrilled with the language, or with, the letters and stuff for that, but I think it'll help the business, and it's not, we'll just have to see how it goes. So I would make a motion that we approve this request. Let's see. I hereby move to approve the project-specific signage alternative for Casa Loca for 174 University Station, and find that the wall signs as proposed do not pose any negative traffic safety or negative impact on the surrounding environment.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So it passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is that a hearing that needs to be closed, or? No. Okay. So the second item was moved. So the third item on the agenda is the annual town meeting article update. So I see that the select board, members of the select board are here to discuss a few of the articles. So why don't we jump into that? And Abby, do we have maybe the long form or the short form to show up on the screen?
Yep. Actually, do you want to give a presentation for, do you want to do, actually, we had item number 3 on the agenda, Article 97. I think they might want to talk about that when we get to the Morrison Park article. Okay,
Sure.
all right.
Yeah, it's
Is that
fine to
okay
wait.
to do that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So why don't we pull up the articles?
Okay. Which one? Should we, all right,
So
we'll
seeing
start with the
one is
medical
the
use one?
the abbreviated, or the
Medi-
new
Medical
medical
use
use that we had talked about. And then it'd be nice for this one to have just some, an explanation of what we're trying to achieve with the definitions and with the table of uses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening, Nancy Hyde, Chair of the Select Board. I'm just here to say thank you for the opportunity to present to you. Nora will actually present on this.
Right.
It's got a lot of zoning content,
Sure.
but we appreciate it, and as you have heard already, and we'll say again tonight a couple of times, if you would like to co-sponsor this with the Select Board, we're trying to get a narrow piece of the amendment of the original article proceeding along this time, knowing that there is much work to be done
Sure.
going forward. So with that, I'd like to have Nora speak to that. And when we get to it, I'll be happy to speak to Article 97 proposal for your consideration.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start by walking you through the article that was presented in 2017, just because everyone wasn't on the board at that time. I'll go pretty quickly.
Is that on? Is it on? On the side, is it on? But, sorry. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So back in 2000, 2013, we adopted a new section of the zoning bylaw for University Station. Prior to 2013, there was only a single medical use term in the bylaw. That was office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises. Since 2013, there have been 3 medical use terms in the bylaw: office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises, office of a healthcare professional, and medical center or clinic. This proposed medical use zoning amendment is needed to clarify where these medical uses, specifically defined medical uses, are permitted and where they're prohibited. In the fall of 2017, there was a medical use article that eliminated the awkward, overly broad use title of office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises, and it revised definitions for the University Avenue multiple mixed-use district medical uses that were added in 2013, definitions for office of a healthcare professional and medical center or clinic. Then it added 2 new definitions for high-intensity medical uses. Those were hospital and substance rehabilitation and treatment facility. In 2017, that article also amended the use chart to include all 4 of these medical use terms. Required the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a special permit for the higher intensity medical uses. This is-
I think some people may ask, so if you go
Sure.
back to that, just, could you explain a little bit more about the UAMUD?
Yes,
Just so that-
UAMUD is the University Avenue Mixed Use District. It's a section in the zoning bylaw that was created and approved by town meeting specifically to develop University Station as a single overlay district mixed-use development. And in that development, there were 2 defined terms: medical center or clinic and office of a healthcare professional. Those definitions, prior to our adoption of the UAMUD, had not been in our bylaw at all. The only use term was office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises.
Thank you for that.
So this is what the use table looked like prior to the fall of 2017, when an article was proposed to change that. And this is what the use chart would have looked like if that article had been fully adopted. In 2017, we were looking to change the term office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises, to office of a healthcare professional, but not change any of the categories where that was used. We were looking to add the use term medical center or clinic, and at that time, the thinking was that that would be appropriate to have by special permit issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals in either the industrial district, the industrial office district, or the administrative research office district. We were looking to add hospital as a defined use and allow that only by special permit in the administrative research office district, and the same with substance rehabilitation or treatment facility was to be allowed only by special permit issued by the ZBA in the ARO district. And here's a map for people who aren't familiar with those districts. The purple blobs, there's one kind of on the top end of the map. Put out right here. This is the Louderbrook Road
Yeah, 109, yeah.
at 109, right at the entrance to the highway. And the other one is right here on East Street and
Yep.
at the other entrance to the highway. So the new definitions that were proposed in the fall 2017 medical use zoning article were for hospital and substance rehabilitation or treatment facility, and I have those definitions as they were proposed written here. A hospital would have been defined as a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients that includes overnight care facilities. And a substance rehabilitation or treatment facility was to have been defined as a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients for substance rehabilitation and/or treatment facilities. That article back in 2017 would have also made 2 small amendments to the 2 existing definitions that were put into the bylaw in 2013. For office of a healthcare professional, it would have taken the existing definition and added some language at the end to specifically exclude hospitals or substance rehabilitation or treatment facilities. And then in the medical center or clinic, it just would have reworded the term. Instead of saying does not include substance rehabilitation or overnight care facilities, it would have said is not a hospital or substance rehabilitation or treatment facility. That was intended to refer back to the other definitions that were to be adopted as part of that article. So in 2017, The planning board reviewed the article. Planning board was the article sponsor, and they voted for unanimous support of the article. They went to the Finance and Warrant Commission. Finance and Warrant Commission recommended approval of the article. And then we went to town meeting, where the article was approved by a 2/3 vote. The article, as all zoning articles and all bylaw articles, was reviewed by the Attorney General's office. The town submitted the approved warrant articles to the Attorney General's office. There were 3 articles at that time that were proposed for zoning, not just this one. The Attorney General's office found a procedural defect in the continuation of one of the planning board hearings. There was a planning board hearing on the 3 zoning amendment articles that was continued to a Finance and Warrant Commission meeting, and the members of the planning board left before the end of that meeting, and there were only 2 members left to continue the hearing, which is not a quorum, so it was not an official continuation. So the Attorney General's office took a look at that and recommended a process to cure the minor defect. The town followed that process, but there was a resident that submitted a letter of objection, and whenever a letter of objection is received, the Attorney General's office has no choice but to deny the article. So that's what happened there. That article then, although it was approved by town meeting, ceased to exist, and our bylaw was not amended. So the planning board took another look at this in the spring of 2019, and at that time considered coming back with the same warrant article. The planning board sponsored the resubmission of all 3 of the 2017 articles that had been disapproved by the Attorney General's office, and they sponsored them unanimously. Then the neighborhood nearest to the East Street ARO attended the zoning hearing, much like this hearing tonight, and there were residents of that neighborhood abutting the East Street ARO that were concerned about the exposure, potential exposure to that neighborhood of a methadone clinic. There had been a rumor going around that a methadone clinic was interested in taking property in the East Street ARO zone. So the planning board at that time discussed that with the residents at their hearing. They did establish that there was no such plans for any substance abuse or methadone clinic, but there was still concern, and the planning board agreed to withdraw their article and vowed to continue working on the article over the coming year and bring it back to town meeting at the following, at that time we would think it would be a fall 2019 meeting. So the planning board discussed it a couple of times, but never really came up with a full article until this January. One of the planning board members looked at this carefully and proposed a more broad way to address this. And that proposal involved the establishment of a overlay district for these high-intensity uses. The planning board first requested a placeholder, the full planning board, for the 2020 warrant article with unanimous support. The select board accepted that and put the warrant put the article on the town meeting warrant. A planning board member drafted a revised article that would create this medical facilities overlay district that would clearly exclude the East Street ARO. As you can see on that slide there, the proposed overlay district would have applied to a portion of the ARO district off of Louderbrook and 109, and it would have also included a portion of University Station, but it would have specifically excluded the East Street ARO district. The planning board members discussed that at one of their meetings and decided that they needed more time to review this. It was a more extensive article than they had seen in the past. And as a result, they requested that the select board allow their withdrawal of the sponsorship of the article. So that I went to the select board with that, and I encouraged them to consider taking over the article, and the select board decided they would do that they would take over sponsorship of the article. However, the select board chose to focus on a narrow, more essential element of the zoning bylaw amendment rather than go forward with the article that was developed with the medical facilities overlay district. They looked at a simpler, partial way to address the problem. The select board revised article that's before you now, the 2020 medical use warrant article, would keep the 2 existing definitions with no changes. Those definitions are office of a healthcare professional and medical center or clinic. This article would also add these defined terms to the use chart, the zoning use chart, and they would remove all references to the outdated term of office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises. The select board agreed that the bylaw could benefit from further changes to take in the entirety of the medical use issue, and they are encouraging the planning board to pursue these further changes for the next town meeting. So this is the proposed use chart that is in the current article. Much like the 2017 version, it takes the office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises, and replaces that term with the term that's already defined in the bylaw, office of a healthcare professional. It does not change any of the categories where that's permitted. It would remain permitted in all of the commercial districts and by special permit of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the general residence district. This bylaw would then add the term medical center or clinic to the zoning bylaw use chart, but it would make it a prohibited use in all districts except for University Station, the UAMUD overlay district, where it is permitted now, specifically permitted by the bylaw in that district. So this doesn't actually change the zoning bylaw, it clarifies it. It shows that you can have a medical center or clinic if approved by the planning board within University Station and nowhere else. So here are the definitions that are in the bylaw now that would remain unchanged. The office of a healthcare professional is now defined and would remain defined as an office for a medical doctor, dentist, psychologist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, or similar physical or mental health care professional, including clinical and laboratory analysis activities directly associated with such medical office use, but excluding offices within medical centers or clinics. The medical center or clinic definition also would remain exactly as it's defined now: a building designed and used for the diagnosis and treatment of human patients that does not include substance rehabilitation or overnight care facilities. There would be no changes at all to the current definitions, and there would be no additional terms or definitions added. So this slide shows the different versions of the article. First, the 2017 article, and it shows the matters that were intended to be addressed by that. The first column with those checks shows that the first three articles would have made amendments to the definitions of office of a healthcare professional and medical center or clinic. The current article at the bottom would not do that. All three of the prior versions would have added new definitions for hospitals and substance rehabilitation or treatment facility. The currently proposed article does not do that. All three of the articles and the currently proposed article would have expanded the zoning use chart to include medical centers or clinics. And the two of the earlier versions, one of the versions, the 2020 version that was presented by a planning board member earlier this year, would have added a new medical facilities overlay district, but the current version that the select board is proposing does not do that. So it only does one of the things on that chart, and that's add the medical use terms properly to the use chart. So just a summary of what the 2020 medical use warrant article is. The select board will proceed with the streamlined version of this warrant article. It's before you tonight as a zoning board public hearing. The planning board is invited by the select board to co-sponsor the select board's article. And the select board will now present this article to the Finance and Warrant Commission at its public hearing on March 2nd. The planning board is invited to review the current article at this public hearing and to prepare a recommendation to town meeting on the article. You're also welcome to make a recommendation to the Finance and Warrant Commission on March 2nd. Any questions?
I have a few to start off. Can you go back about 3 slides where we, the definition, yeah, perfect. One question is, but excluding offices within medical centers or clinics, what is the reasoning for having that there? Is that covered by the medical center or clinic?
It's showing that there's a difference between a general office and a medical center or clinic. The medical center or clinic is a more intensive office and is only allowed at University Station. So something like the Brigham and Women's facility is a medical center or clinic. It has individual doctor's offices in them, but altogether it creates a medical center. If you had something that was much smaller, say there's a medical building on High Street that has a couple of dentist office and a couple of doctor's offices in it. That's a pre-existing use. It doesn't change. The zoning officer, the building commissioner, would have to make a determination of whether that, if a new building like that came in, whether that would be a medical center or a clinic, or whether that's just as simply a doctor's office. A
Right.
single office of a single practice group would clearly fall into the office of healthcare professional. Something larger than that, something with multiple offices, would likely fall into the medical center or clinic.
Great. So I'm happy that that language is there. That's a nice distinction. The other question I had is the use of the words "or similar physical or mental health care professional." So how is that determined, and what was the? I know the idea behind that is that we have, like, even physical therapists. Like, now we have a physical therapist, so
So
it should cover.
So right now, we have a definition of office of a doctor or dentist, not a resident on the premises, and we have another definition of personal care facility, or personal services facility, I believe is how it's defined in the bylaw. Anything that falls into either of those categories is permitted, and if something falls outside of those, it's prohibited. It's the building commissioner that makes that determination. So in the instance of a physical therapist, we have a couple of physical therapists. There's at least one on High Street, and there's one in Washington Street. There may be a second one on High Street. Those are all allowed as personal service
Okay.
establishments right now. They could also fall under this category. The definition we're continuing here is a definition that was put in 2013. It was written as part of the University Station project, and we're not recommending that it get changed at this time. If the planning board moves forward with a more holistic review of medical uses for a future town meeting, they may want to look at that definition, and maybe they want to make some changes to it, similar to the changes that were proposed in 2017. But for right now, the idea is to keep the definitions we have and just make sure we get them into the use chart in the proper way so that we can clearly define where they're allowed and where they're not.
Great. And then the last one is even at our last meeting, we had some residents come in and concerns even from the board with regards to the substance abuse. So is this intended to not cover that?
Yes, so that's a larger issue. Our current zoning bylaw simply doesn't address substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities. We tried in 2017 to address those. We tried again in 2019, and one of the planning board members' articles that they presented earlier this year also would have tried to address those. I think the planning board decided that that was a bigger issue, that they wanted more time to review, and the select board agreed that it is a larger issue that should be considered carefully. They're recommending that we close the gap that we have now by simply not having that medical center or uses in the use chart, and by having one term office of a doctor or a dentist in one place and another term office of a healthcare professional in another. So this is a cleanup bylaw and nothing more than that. It simply clarifies the existing conditions.
Yeah, I mean, it seems more clear to me. So we can just start, I don't know, Dave or Deb, Bill, anybody else? Oh, why don't I ask my last question? So if you go to your next slide, the table of uses, or the one before, can you just explain the footnotes? So obviously we refer to section 9.7, but what is that saying there? So except in accordance with. So
that's
residents will definitely be
That's
wondering, what
saying,
does that mean?
since the use chart is by underlying districts and not by overlay districts, the districts that are listed there are all the different residential districts and all the different commercial and industrial districts. The industrial district is where the University Avenue mixed-use district falls. So, but we don't want to allow this use throughout the industrial district. We only want to allow it in University Station, where it's already allowed by our bylaw. So rather than make that a Y for yes, it's prohibited there, we make it an N, saying it's not permitted anywhere in the industrial zone except for in the University Avenue mixed-use district, and it refers to the section of the bylaw under which the planning board could consider that use. You remember that in University Station, all uses require the planning board's approval. So there are uses that have already been approved. If there are future uses, they have to come back to you to revise they have a master development plan for the project. They need to request the planning board's permission to revise that plan and to add or change uses. So it's a procedure that's already in the bylaw, and that simply is to clarify that medical centers or clinics are not allowed anywhere else, just within University Station.
Is it worth adding that extra language? I'm sure you've thought about that, that sentence when it was, because I'm just wondering if, I could see that just raising questions. Is there a way to clarify that a little bit more? Are you fine with that?
So it's saying it's prohibited, except as allowed by the planning board according to section 9.7. I'm not sure how else, do you have a
just know that
suggestion
I-
for how
I
else you
think-
would
I just-
write that?
When I was watching the FinCom meeting, it seemed like that question came up. But if you're fine with I agree with the way that it's stated. I just didn't know if there was something that might,
So I think we
somebody-
want to start with the point of being prohibited and then add a way that it's permitted rather than the other way. Another way you could go about it is say yes and have the footnote, but only within the University Avenue
which
district.
may-
I would rather start with prohibiting it
Yeah, I agree
and
with
having
that.
the more narrow area where it's permitted.
yeah, I'm fine with that. Deb, do you have any questions?
So back in 2017, can you go back to the definition for 2020? You had under Office of Healthcare Professional, excluding hospitals, substance rehabilitation, or treatment facilities. But in 2020, that's been removed.
Yes.
Why?
So the 2020 article that the Select Board is proposing does not make any changes to the definitions. These changes that were made in 2017 were made because there was also a new definition to be added for hospitals and for substance rehabilitation treatment facilities. If you're not adding those to the bylaw, then you don't want to define something to exclude something that's not in the bylaw.
But
If
you
it's
have
not
it for medical
defined,
center or clinic. So why can't you put it up with Office of Healthcare Professional?
that definition, as I said, the definition was written that way in 2013 for the University Station bylaw. We were looking to change that by adding these definitions, but since you're not going forward, the planning board decided not to go forward with the article. The select board took it up and are going forward with an article that keeps the existing definitions. I would not recommend making any changes to these definitions unless you're going the full route of adopting the 4 separate medical use categories. I don't think you want to call them out individually unless they're all defined and there are places where they are set to be used. What that medical center or clinic definition, you'll notice that it doesn't have capitalized terms for substance rehabilitation, and it doesn't even say hospital, it just says excluding overnight care facilities. So that definition is referring to those types of uses, but not calling them out as individual defined uses. And I don't believe they should be called out unless they're defined and placed in your use chart. I think that opens you up to even more.
Okay, but if you go through the bylaw, you'll find that presently, right now, we don't have any definitions for dialysis centers, urgent care, pharmacy, drugstore, acupuncture, and they're not in the use chart. We have definitions for shuttle, fitness, or health center, and those aren't in the use chart. So I'm not understanding why you can't still put that exception in there of the hospital or
So
substance.
if there's an item that's not defined in the use chart, the building commissioner makes a determination of where it fits. So you mentioned a dialysis center. I believe that the building inspector would now look at that as a personal care service. And I believe that is why we have a dialysis center within the Glacier Avenue Highway Business District, and I believe that was approved as a personal care service. We have individual doctor's offices that are approved as shown in the use chart. We have physical therapy, other uses that are not defined, but that are permitted by the building commissioner with his interpretation of what's allowed and what's not. When there's a use that is very distinct, different from everything else, and especially a use that you're looking to prohibit, that's when you want to define it and clearly prohibit it. We've discussed at a previous meeting the adult uses section, where the bylaw specifically defines those uses, puts them in the use chart, and gives them an area where they're permitted and they're prohibited everywhere else. That's the best way of dealing with uses that you're not looking to encourage. For uses you're looking to encourage, if you know about them ahead of time, it's a good idea to put them in the use chart. If they're similar enough to something else, as you mentioned, a dialysis center or a physical therapy, then the building commissioner can easily approve those under the terms of the bylaw as they have now.
I understand what you're saying about how you have to, for example, the Office of Healthcare Professional, that though that and the medical center were specifically designed for the University Ave overlay district. So why are you trying to bring those over? We don't take the FMUOD's uses and bring those over to the use charts. So why are we trying to do this?
I believe we do. I think the FMUOD uses are defined in the use chart.
Not some of them. For example, the shuttle, that's not in the use chart, but it's allowed in the FMUOD. And so I'm just wondering, why can't you just, it's an overlay district, so why can't you just have those? I think we have there's a lot of good stuff in here. And I think that personally, I'd like to see Office of Doctor or Dentist kept, Office of Healthcare Professional, and then Medical Center or Clinic, but really tweak the language and expand on it, and so that we can get some things into the industrial section.
And I think that's something you
really
could do.
important. But I'm not sure if I don't know if this does that all.
It doesn't, and it's not
So-
intended to do all that. All it's intended to do is make the needed clarification right now. There's a hole in the bylaw now because medical center and clinic is not in the use chart. And the concern is that someone will try to establish a medical center or clinic outside of University Station. And at this point, the building commissioner would have to consider whether or not that falls under the term of Office of a Doctor or Dentist. By placing the terms as they're currently defined, with an Office of a Healthcare Professional specifically excluding an office within a medical center or clinic. Let me get to the one we're looking at now, not the old one. By having that specific exclusion and then defining what a medical center or clinic is and saying where that's allowed, we're protecting ourselves. So I agree, there are plenty of uses that we could add to the use chart, and if the planning board wants to take that up, not just medical uses, but other ones, you mentioned shuttle. If you'd like to take that up and add to the use chart, you're welcome to expand it as much as you want. I think these are the most critical adds that we need to make now. I think we need to clarify that there's an undefined term, Office of a Doctor or Dentist, not a resident on the premises. That term we've had probably since the first zoning bylaw in the 1950s. I don't think it's as well defined as it should be. It's not defined, there's no clear definition, but even the term itself raises questions. One question that came up is, does that mean that if you have an office of a doctor or a dentist, there must be a medical resident on the premises? And if there's not a medical resident there, that's not allowed? That wasn't the intention. The intention, I believe, back in the 50s when this was first established, was using the term resident to refer to a person who lives in the building. But that's not clear, and without a definition, it doesn't help us, because there's already a definition of Office of a Healthcare Professional. I think it makes the most sense to use that definition, put that one in the chart, and move forward.
So just one final question, just to sort of clarify, there's a lot of discussion out there about the new Brigham coming in and the mental health services, and concern that there is a potential for detoxification in there. Do you know, is this going to?
So the planning board approved the Brigham and Women's Building, and you have a very specific approval that you granted for that, and that building was described at that time. You'd have to look back to your approval to see exactly what's permitted and what's not. That is within University Station, and it's currently approved under the medical center or clinic definition. So whether that includes mental health facilities or not, I don't know. I'd have to look at your definition to see what you've already approved. But the second phase was approved at the time of the first phase.
Thanks. Bill, do you have any questions or comments?
So, in a nutshell, what are we trying to prohibit?
You're not trying to prohibit anything. What you're trying to do is keep the uses in the districts where they're already allowed. To clarify the bylaw. Right now, the bylaw was written to only allow medical centers or clinics in the University Avenue district. Prior to 2013, that term wasn't used in the bylaw, it wasn't defined, it wasn't even thought of. In 2013, that term was added specifically to allow medical centers or clinics, large facilities, in University Station. This article is intended to make it clear that those type of uses cannot go anywhere but University Station. That's the only place they would be allowed. So this bylaw is intended to clarify, not to change.
All right, I need more time with it, but anyway, go ahead.
Dave?
So we were talking about like a dialysis treatment facility. Now, why wouldn't that clearly be medical clinic? Like, wouldn't that, it's for the treatment of patients and
Well,
with this
because we didn't have a definition. I'm sorry, we didn't have a use chart that allowed that. We didn't even have the definition at the time that the dialysis center went in to the Glacier Drive facility. So that was considered at that time as a personal services and was approved as a personal services. If there are doctor's offices within that dialysis center, they were approved as doctor's offices. Under this definition, it could either be an office of a healthcare professional or it could be a medical center or clinic, and I think it would be dependent on the scale. If it was a single office or single practice that was offering dialysis within their facility, it may be something that would be permitted under office of a healthcare professional. If it was multiple practices or a large facility, then I believe that the building commissioner would limit it to medical center or clinic and therefore to University Station.
So I'm thinking that that's kind of an example of why defining this is helpful, because without a definition and a table of uses for that definition, you search for the closest possible thing, and how that ended up being personal treatment or, so with this addition, something that is of larger scale would clearly fall into this category, and it would go to University Station.
That's right.
And so, I think that this is it's scaled back to be a very specific article now that accomplishes what you're saying there. So I support it. I think we should sponsor it as a planning board.
I just want to make clear, the select board intend this as a step one in a two-step process. And the hope is that the planning board then will take the next year, and beginning soon, not waiting until we get to fall town meeting, with looking at a more holistic way to address medical uses.
I think at this time, probably comments from the public since specific to this. So if there's any comments from the public, questions or comments? Sure, and you can just go right up to the podium. Thank you for coming.
How does this affect the Meditech parcel, if at all?
Nora, would you like to answer that?
The uses that are currently prohibited at Meditech remain prohibited, and the uses that are permitted remain permitted. So what this does is it allows, the Meditech parcel is within the ARO. It allows an office of healthcare professional in that district, just as it now allows an office of a doctor or dentist. It does not allow a medical clinic, medical center or clinic. That's prohibited in the ARO.
Sorry, one more question. This is my first time at a town meeting, or a meeting like this. What is the cost of doing nothing? So it seems like this article's gone back and forth a lot and changed a lot, and I think I'm tracking along with it. But what is the specific risk of doing nothing and not changing it, particularly since it's been turned down a couple times and come back in multiple forms? Because I think there's, I live in the East Street district, there's a number of residents that are now at this point just concerned that they don't fully understand the implications of it. And I think that's where some of the resistance is coming from.
Sure.
Hi, I'm happy to answer the potential costs of not doing anything. It runs into the situation that Nora referred to. If somebody wanted to do a medical facility anywhere but University Station right now, and it didn't have anything in the use chart, it might go anywhere in town. This specifically says it can't go anywhere else in town. It can only go at University Station. So the implications financially are, if it goes somewhere else in town, generally these are nonprofits, and it would become a non-taxable entity if it was owned. So what we're trying to do is protect the commercial tax base and also allow it where it's appropriate and not have it go in other places where it's not appropriate. So there are consequences to not doing this. Nora explained we're trying to have the use chart be very specific so there isn't that, I'll call it a loophole. We're closing the door where the door is open right now. So we just want to make sure we don't run into any problems. So it is protecting the town.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. I know back on February 11th, it was asked of Abby if she was aware or knew of any talks that the town was having with any facility that would allow a drug facility detox center, and you said no. I just want to ask the select board, have you heard anything or know of anything different with any of the talks with the Brigham and Women's that's coming in, second phase? Because I just received an invite for a coffee and conversation on the Brigham and Women's Healthcare Center, and it's an informational presentation and discussion of the planned care center expansion in Westwood. So all of this kind of coming together is making me very wary of what's going to be happening. I mean, I know right now at the Brigham and Women's facility, there's no psychiatry. But I've seen something online and also even a job posting in a psychiatric ward, psychiatric position in Westwood. So that was my question.
So this wouldn't have any impact on that, would it?
So it would not. The Brigham and Women's facility, Phase 1 and Phase 2, were both approved by the planning board at the same time. The application you received defines the type of uses that are permitted. I don't have that application in front of me to check exactly what was permitted and what wasn't, but I can tell you that a psychiatric office is a doctor's office. It's
Exactly, yeah.
permitted now. It would be permitted after this goes through. What's not permitted, you refer to a psychiatric ward. There's no overnight patients that are permitted. That's not allowed. It's not allowed now. It won't be allowed in the future. That's not what this article addresses. This article simply clarifies where a medical center or clinic can go, and it can only go in University Station. The fear is that if this article is not passed, that a medical center or clinic could end up anywhere that a doctor's office could go right now. So we're trying to narrow the focus and make sure that the smaller doctor's offices continue to be allowed. Doctors and medical facilities, small offices, continue to be allowed in the commercial districts or by special permit in the general residence district, but that the larger medical center or clinic is only allowed at University Station and only with the approval of this board.
Thank you. And then as far as providing support for this for the selectmen, so how do we go about that? So FinCom is on Monday night. I like these additional definitions. I think it adds clarity. I do think it also tightens up the holes that we may have. I like that it defines the use specific to university. And like you said, the clarification of the no overnight. I think, so as far as voting on this, we have a 4-member board tonight for supporting this, co-sponsoring it. How do we go about, what's the timing on doing that? And
I think I would suggest as we go through these items at the end of each discussion, we vote to either, to endorse it or whatever, just initially, and then on this one, we would vote also if we want to co-sponsor it.
Yep. Yep, because really tonight you're voting to make a recommendation to FinCom. So you can vote now on sponsoring the article and make a recommendation to the Finance and Warrant Commission. So you can report to them for their meeting next week on Monday.
And so with the 4-member board tonight, if, let's say it's, what would happen if the vote wasn't in favor of co-sponsoring it? Does it then?
Then it would still go forward as a select board article.
Sure, of course.
I would say you don't need to overthink this. If you do want to support it, I think that just helps the article move through the process towards a Finance Commission favorable recommendation. If you don't want to, that's okay. We're going to bring it forward, but you still have your vote on it as the zoning amendment that it is. So that vote will be what ultimately, in addition to Finance Commission at town meeting, Planning Board makes a recommendation. What is heard at town meeting is the Finance Commission recommendation, but they'll hear from, the Planning Board. They'll hear what, anybody at town meeting will hear your recommendation as well. It improves our chances of success if you want to co-sponsor it. And that's what I invite you to do, because You can see how narrow our focus is. We know there's a lot of work to do. We weren't trying to do that. We know you had a lot of work to do and you needed more time, so we're just peeling off a piece of it.
Yeah, because I mean, I am in favor of this. I think it does do a good job.
Your support would be very helpful.
So,
I'll make a motion that we support this article, that we recommend that FinCom support this article, and that we co-sponsor it with the Select Board.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? So I'll second it. And any further discussion? So although,
I'm still caught up with the hospital or substance rehabilitation not being able to put with us a healthcare professional. I know you keep explaining it, but I know that in our interim counsel, it said that if he had to represent someone, he'd rather have that definition of Office of Healthcare Professional if they wanted to do substance rehabilitation. So I'm not understanding, if we have it under medical center or clinic, why we can't have it under.
It's not that you can't have it. If the planning board wants to take up an article at the next town meeting to change that language. So right now, the select board is recommending that we not change anything. They're trying a very simplified, quick fix to the bylaw to simply close the door that's wide open, to take the uses that are currently defined and put them in the use chart. If the planning board wants to go back to what they looked at in 2017, which was further amending those definitions, they can do that. But they should do that along with adding new definitions for hospital and substance rehabilitation treatment facility. You should not add a term that is not otherwise defined and is not otherwise in the use chart. I realize that the term medical center or clinic that was put in 2013 refers to substance rehabilitation and doesn't define it. That's not a good practice to do that again. I think that doing so could also raise a red flag. If you refer to a use, but that use is not put into your use chart and you don't know where it's allowed or where it's not, then I think the question is, well, what are you saying here? So I would not make any changes to the definitions. We have definitions. The select board is looking to keep those definitions as they are for now, for this first step, and simply add the medical center and clinics to the use chart and change the term office of a doctor or dentist to office of a healthcare professional. The planning board is encouraged to look at the wider, broad use of medical use definitions and do more work on it for the next town meeting. This is the first step.
If they moved in there into these areas down at University Station, they'd be nonprofits?
At University Station?
Yes.
So the thought is that a medical center or clinic, more often than not, is a nonprofit. If they're at University Station, there's a requirement that they have to enter a pilot agreement with the select board or they can't go there. University Station was developed under a voluntary development agreement between the developer and the select board. They have to conform with that. And one of the terms that the select board wisely put into that agreement was the requirement for a pilot agreement. That doesn't exist anywhere else in the town. So if you had a medical center or a clinic outside of University Station, which is something that could happen today without it defined in the use chart, without it shown in the use chart as prohibited. Let me go back to right here. Without it shown as prohibited in the industrial district, one could go there, and there would be no requirement that they have a pilot agreement, which means zero tax dollars. I'm sorry, a pilot is a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. It's something that nonprofits, when they have to, they enter those agreements with towns to pay a portion, a sum that's equivalent to a portion of their taxes. For instance, Brigham and Women's Hospital office building at University Station pays an amount that's equivalent to 25% of the taxes that would be paid if they were a for-profit entity. If Brigham and Women's had chosen to set up shop, say at the corner of University Avenue and Canton Street, outside of the University Station district, they would not have had to enter that payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the town, and there would be no taxes at all paid to the town. So we're trying to limit the negative fiscal impact, but we're also trying to place these large medical facilities in an area where they belong. University Station is appropriate because it's closest to the train station and has ample parking. So that's the area where we currently allow them, and this bylaw is just a clear explicitly state that that's the only place that will allow them.
So if we agree to this, for the record, can you state that this will protect healthcare professional in any of those zones, medical center or clinic for any substance rehabilitation facilities?
Medical center or clinic is clearly defined in the bylaw to exclude substance
Right,
rehabilitation
but the other
and
one's
treatment
not. So
facilities.
just for clarity's sake, this is what's gonna come up.
Because,
over and
because
over
there's,
again.
yeah, because there is no definition for substance rehabilitation or treatment facilities, the town remains exposed to those, whether you go forward with this article or whether you do nothing. Unless you adopt a definition and find a place in the use chart where you will place those facilities, you are exposed, you remain exposed. The Select Board's article does not address hospitals and does not address substance rehabilitation and treatment facilities. That's the next step for the planning board to tackle. This takes the first step and addresses medical centers or clinics. That's all it addresses. It takes them and puts them only in University Station.
Doesn't, I'm thinking like for the definition of Office of Healthcare Professional, it's expressed in terms of the person, like is a doctor, dentist, including mental health care professional, psychologist, chiropractor. I mean, in that definition, it wouldn't make sense to say substance rehabilitation center and all, because you're talking about the provider, and then it would fall under mental health or doctor or psychologist. So I don't think in that one you'd need to call out substance abuse. And
But we
then-
did in the 2017.
Because in 2017, we had added those definitions, and it was, like, the part that was stricken out, it was because we had 4 things there. So we had defined substance abuse, and then you needed to make sure that in the 3rd item down, you excluded what had been in the first item. So without it mentioned at all, it's not talking about a building that is a substance abuse treatment facility. It's identifying for the office of a medical person, essentially, which would cover that. And then in the medical clinic, it's not talking about substance abuse at all either, so, or it's saying.
It's specifically excluding substance abuse from the medical center or clinic. And in the office of a healthcare professional, it's limiting it to an office. I believe the building commissioner would interpret that as a practice. If it's multiple practices sharing a building, then it becomes a medical center. But without putting medical center in the use chart, you don't have that opportunity. This is the use chart from 2017, far more extensive. It added hospital and it added substance rehabilitation treatment facility. That's the second part of this that the planning board should spend the next several months looking carefully at and seeing how you get to full protection for the town. What the select board are going forward with is the bare minimum. It's making a clear choice to put in the use chart medical center or clinics and to prohibit them everywhere except for University Station. So it's the first step. You do need to take more steps. This step does nothing to change our situation with our exposure to either hospitals or substance rehabilitation treatment facilities. That exposure remains today the same as it would be if this article was passed.
Thank you. So any further discussion? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
Debon?
Abstain.
So we have two in support, two abstain.
Okay. So I'll move to the planning board articles. Oh, yeah, do you want me to put that one?
Article 97? Sure, yeah. Yes. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Regarding the article, the zoning article for the Obed Baker property on High Street, the Select Board voted last night to withdraw that article. The good news is we have a response to the RFP, but it's not fully developed. And so I just want you to know that we spoke about it last night and talked about the idea, we'll have to decide officially, but of creating a working group to look at that proposal. It's just one, so we can work with that one and see what can become of the property. We've long needed to do something with that. We had hoped it would be a little bit more straightforward and we could bring this article forward, and it's just not ready. So again, we voted to withdraw that officially.
Thank you. And so next on the list, sure, so this is the short-term rental. Let me just grab my notes here.
So you have in your packet the legal advertisement. In your packet, and then also at the front of the room is the legal advertisement that with the full article language that I have put into a PowerPoint.
So the Article 3.
Do you have?
It's not there.
Yeah, so I have my sheet here. So this was the article that we've been discussing for a number of months, is dealing with, it's a zoning amendment related to the renting of rooms for residential properties, to see if the town will vote to approve certain amendments to the Westwood zoning bylaws as follows, or take any other action in relation thereto. The new language shown in underlined red font. Do you have this?
This is the existing table
Yes.
of uses.
Yeah, so I'll just
then-
speak to it. So adding a definition to section 2.0 definitions for short-term rental and long-term rental. So the short-term rental is renting of rooms by resident owners or the furnished of the table, of table board and a dwelling by the resident owner to not more than 3 persons other than members of the family for over 5 consecutive days, up to 29 consecutive days. And a long-term rental would be renting of rooms by resident owner or the furnishing of table board and a dwelling by the resident owner to no more than 3 persons other than members of the family for over 30 consecutive days. So, and then you had the table of uses where we would distinguish short-term and long-term, and that would comply with that. So the way that we were discussing it as a board was that if you supported this article, then you would be in favor of somebody having short-term rentals of greater than 5 consecutive days. So you wouldn't have, we have situations now where you have a short-term rental situation where you have somebody who can come in for just 1 evening or 2 evenings. And this would allow for any resident in the town to rent for greater than that, as is done. So I don't have anything further with this. If there's any other board members that have any other questions or comments.
I wanted to clarify.
Sure.
So I was reading this, and so when it says members of the family, is the intention that means the people who are renting need to be related to the people who own the house, or is it, when you say not more than 3 persons? So the situation I'm imagining is, I think that the way this is written, it would prohibit, or it doesn't cover a family of more than 3 people. So like if there's 4 people who come for the weekend, that would also be blocked because it's
I think this
only
was
3
included
days.
because that's what our current bylaw states.
If I could just explain, the way the building commissioner interprets that, it's not more than 3 unrelated individuals, so you could have actually 9 people, that 3 are related to each other, then 3 others, then 3 others. It could be several families. You couldn't have 4 people that have no relation to each other. And the relation of the people who are renting does not have to be to the owner. So the owner can rent the property to up to 3 unrelated people. This is a common definition in zoning bylaws to avoid group homes. That's probably not the right term, grouper
Yeah.
homes. Was a thing back in the 1970s that was very common for people to rent a house together. You still see that in some vacation areas. It doesn't generally happen here, but it's to avoid large groups of people sharing space in a home. So you could only have up to 3. But if you could, that doesn't mean you could only have 3 people. You could have, say you had a couple and then a single person and another single person. They're not related to each other or to the homeowner, but they don't exceed 3 unrelated individuals.
Okay, so you could, for example, you could go on vacation in the summer, and then you could have another family come use your house for a week and with Airbnb, and that would be okay, as long as it was more than 5 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I see this as a challenging, so the board will speak for, thank you
Oh,
for
sorry,
being.
okay, can tell I think.
So that we'll discuss at the board and then we go to public comment. Yeah, I mean, I see this as a challenging article to get passed. This is one of those things where some people don't feel the effect of it until it's nearby. So I do see this as a challenging article to move forward. But do you have any other questions or comments, Dave?
Is there anything what about enforcement? Like, so
Yeah.
how would this play out? Like, if, what would that process look like if someone was upset, they felt that there was a house being rented out to a lot of people that didn't fit this criteria?
Yeah, I mean, I think enforcement is going to be another challenging question to hear. So as far as enforcement, the way I was thinking is that if there's a number of different platforms for which you can rent for these types of items, Airbnb, ARBO. And so if somebody is allowing for a one-night rental, then I would think that you could call the building commissioner and then they might be able to make a phone call. It's a challenging enforcement. Beyond this, similar to the medical uses I see is future warrant articles that might have to do with registering and a number of other
I guess
things.
I was imagining, like,
Yeah.
so you make the complaint to the building commissioner, then, do you get fined or warned, or kind of it follows this usual
Yeah.
process, right? So I guess you could get like a $50, like a warning and then a fine, and.
I'm not even sure about that.
Would know what-
So whenever there's a report of a potential violation, the building commissioner first starts by sending a letter to the building owner, telling them that they have heard that there may be a potential violation, and inviting them to come in and talk about it. And usually there's a 30-day period for that, to either come in and talk about it or cure the violation. And then if the person either doesn't come in or doesn't correct the situation, there's usually a second warning letter. And after that, it specifies a time period when fines will begin. And then a third letter that says fines begin today, and it's $100 for the first offense, $200 for the second, $300 for each subsequent offense, and each offense is each day that they fail to satisfy the zoning bylaw. So in a case where someone was willfully violating this section of the bylaw, that was reported to the building commissioner was able to verify that that was true, he could eventually impose fines. And those fines would continue until the violator stopped violating the bylaw.
So I think, like, if I were looking to rent my place, then it's the easiest way to understand this is there's a 6-day minimum, right? Like, that's pretty much it.
That's right. And the reason why the 5 was selected is so that if a resident of town was going away for a week, they could go away and rent their house for that week. So that's why that was part of the rationale. But I do think it's a challenging one. Bill, do you have any questions
Well,
or comments?
if you wanted to go away now, Dave, or if you wanted to stay home, you could rent it by the hour. We have no law prohibiting that. So if you wanted someone to, if you wanted to rent out the rooms and continually rent them out all day long, you could do that. You make a lot of money, maybe. But anyway, I think this is a good start and will help us keep a neighborhood, and not have people come in and buy a house just to rent it out.
Deb, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't. Did we ever hear back from the Board of Health on this? No.
So I made a call to the Board of Health, and then after it might have been a couple meetings ago, where we limited the focus to this, where it's just about the duration. I think in the future, there may be warrant articles that do deal with Board of Health inspections, registering, and then potential tax for the town.
You know, I don't see anything wrong with the way it's worded, so.
Anything else from the board before we open it up? So if anybody from the public?
Oh, Brian,
or-
I just have one, in our definition for long-term, it ends with over 30 consecutive days. I'm thinking maybe we should say 30 or more consecutive days, just account for that 30th day. Because
Yes.
for the short term, we say up to
Yeah.
29.
Yeah, good catch, Abby. There was a resident here that wanted to speak.
I just wanted to come and say that I do approve, I mean, I hope that this could move forward, the new language on the bylaw, for a minimum of at least 5 days. It has happened in our neighborhood, as you know, it's really disruptive. And we've seen people rent for 1 night, 3 nights, there's litter on the lawn, cigarette butts all over the lawn, and we've called the police and everything else like that, but I do think there has to be some type of time frame so that people aren't coming and going. We have cars that pull up just to look at the house, cars pull up to meet other people, to go in and look at the room. It's just been really disruptive to the neighborhood. So anything that could be done from the town would be really helpful for residents, because it's changed the lifestyle for everyone on the street, so. But Nora, I just wanted to say, I was under the impression, when I read the original bylaw, that 3 people, were 3 individual renters. So if you have a couple, does that count as 2 renters?
No, that counts as one.
Oh. I wouldn't know that. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so that means like, because they've been doing 3 bedrooms constantly, so 3 people in, a few days later, 3 more cars, 3 people in, so you actually would have more than 3 people if it was a couple?
Actually, you know what? I'm sorry, for the definition, when we have in the another section of the bylaw, where we define what's a family and what's not, that refers to more than 3 unrelated individuals. I think the way this definition is written now, let's see, it says, for short-term rental, renting of rooms by resident owner or the furnishing of table or board in a dwelling by the resident owner to not more than 3 persons other than members of the family. I think that if you had a single family that was more than 3 people, you would not be restricted from renting to them. I don't think this is saying only 3 people by saying that other than members of a family. If you're looking to limit it to 3 people, then you need to do that specifically. Take out that language that says other than members of the family. Or perhaps you want to say to no more than 5 people. If you're really trying to cap the number of people, that's not what this does. This allows families of whatever size they are.
As renters.
As renters, correct.
The situation next door to me, the family does live along with the renters,
Mhm.
with a lot of people.
So there is I think there's a habitation guide to how many people fit in so much square space. So depending on the size of the house, you're limited in that regard. That's a building code issue. So you may be limited in the number of persons that are in a building, but the zoning bylaw does not specifically limit you. So here, what this is saying is just 3 unrelated individuals. But if they're related, if they're members, this other than members of the family, says that you can have a family of more than 3 people renting. And in fact, I would imagine you could have 3 families, the way this is written. So if that's not what you have in mind, then you want to change this language to be more limiting.
Yeah, I had been thinking more along the lines of the duration. So does the board have any, Dave, what are you thinking when you hear this?
Could I just add something?
Sure.
I mean, I know there are other rentals in town. I've looked them up. When this all started, I went online, I have all the listings. And they're still looking, they rent on, Airbnb, VRBO, hot pads. And I know there are other ones in town, never knew it before, everything's quiet, but this is the worst case scenario. The house was purchased to, be almost, it just feels like a rooming house because you have people coming and going. So I think it's gonna get more popular as Islington gets more developed down the street and more restaurants and things like that. There are gonna be more homes that will have a lot of people renting. So I think it's just really important to put something in place to, protect the amount of, never mind the residents, but the amount of people that are coming into a home. I mean, this turned into a full-fledged rooming house overnight. None of the residents even knew what was going on. Just volumes of cars coming in. They did buy it with the intent. They had keypads put on right away, and it just hasn't been pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could suggest that you might want to limit it to a single family or not more than 3 unrelated individuals. I think that would address the concerns. So if it's a single family that happens to have 5 or 6 people, they're permitted to rent it, but if they're unrelated individuals, they're capped at 3.
Nora, what is a table board?
That's something like a bed and breakfast. Table board is when you provide food at a table for people to eat. So you're not just giving them the rooms, but you're actually cooking for them.
Okay.
This pretty much bans a bed and breakfast also, right? I mean, you wouldn't be able to have a bed and breakfast.
I think that's even under a different designation.
There is a definition of bed and breakfast. That's separate. So there are many different definitions in here.
So I'm in
The bed and breakfast is
favor,
allowed.
I'm in favor of what Nora recommended, as far as one family or more than 3.
3 individuals.
Can
yeah.
we still tweak this definition, though? Is that, yeah?
Yes, I think we can, yeah.
Are you okay with that, Deb?
Yeah, that's fine.
Bill?
Yep.
Dave?
I mean, that would help.
And did you catch that, Abby, from the?
Yep, so we'll be adding language to both these definitions for a single family or not more than 3.
Yeah.
Keep the rest the same,
Yeah.
more than 3 people.
And are there any other comments from the public? Seeing none. So then at this point, we vote to recommend this to FinCom? Same as the other?
Yep.
So does somebody want to make a motion?
Make a motion to move this forward to FinCom. Short-term rental, long-term rental definition.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And any more discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Abstained? So that's 3 yeses, 1 no. Okay, so the next item is the prohibitive language, Article 4. So to see if the town will vote to approve certain amendments to Section 1.4 in order to clarify that use is not listed and expressly permitted in the zoning bylaw or otherwise permitted in a district or listed in the use regulation Section 4.0 shall be deemed prohibited or take any other action in relation thereto. So what you can see here is an additional sentence added to, as a potential addition. This is used in other towns. The statement is, any use not listed herein or otherwise permitted in a district shall be deemed as prohibited. The sentence just prior to it appears that it leads towards being prohibitory, but it's not prohibitory language. That's my understanding of it. So from the board's standpoint, Dave, do you have any comments for this one?
I like the intent of this, but it does seem to me that it already accomplishes this, that it says, for any purpose that is other than is expressly permitted. It feels like the additional language is just restating what was already there. So I was open to ways to make it stronger, but I don't think repeating the words makes it stronger. So
Yeah.
I just don't think it's necessary.
Deb, what do you think about this?
I disagree. I think that second sentence sort of captures it all because it says any use not listed herein, which is what we're running into with some of the definitions that we have right now that we're trying to work through. I think that this makes it stronger. And maybe a little bit more protective than the original sentence, because the other one is more, it leads it to interpretation, basically, whereas this one here specifically says unless it's not, if it's not listed herein, it's not permitted.
And then, Bill, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think it makes, adds some strength to it. I'm not,
And then I have looked at this as far as like an unintended consequence type of thing to see like what do we, I looked at the list of uses to see are we, if this is included, what would, are we keeping out things that the town doesn't want to have? But then what if something comes up that the town would like to have in the business? So I looked at the uses and it seems like it's thorough at this point, but but that was one of the things that I was thinking about going back and forth with this language.
Well, with the unintended consequences, it's just like the physical therapy where it's placed under personal care. So it's going to be left.
Yeah.
Not really personal. I mean, it is personal care, but it's more medical.
You know, I think Steve Olenoff also, at FinCom, he shared an example, I'm not sure, I don't know the history of it, but he had mentioned there was an adult daycare that wasn't in the bylaws, and then Planning Board was able to add that in at the subsequent town meeting. So it sounded like that seemed to be a good process to get a desired business use in. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I mean, that's like, I think that, I don't see that adding the language changes the outcome there. Like, it is a good question as to how something that doesn't seem to line up, you know, how does a dialysis center become personal care? But because it was the closest thing that fit. Now, it says that any manner, any use or manner that is expressly permitted, and then just saying it's deemed as prohibited, I don't see that I don't think it would change the outcome of that. I think it would still be trying to fit things into what's, if it's close enough.
Yeah.
Then it would fit. So that's my only objection, is I just don't think it, and I think that's what we're gonna get, what you are gonna get asked by FinCom and everything is why are you, I mean, some of them were like, why are you wasting my time with this if it's not gonna have an impact?
Yeah.
So.
But there were some members that thought that the sentence before was prohibitory, only to find out that it wasn't prohibitory. So you had, I think there was a misunderstanding of even thinking that we had prohibitory language, that the town could bite its teeth into to use. Like, nor would the asphalt plant, would this prevent an asphalt plant type of thing if we didn't already have that as a prohibited use?
Again, I think either it's a manner other than expressly permitted, or it's deemed as prohibited. Either way, if the asphalt plants, if the decision is, if it's possible to fit that in under the first sentence, then it's gonna fit in.
But I don't think that first sentence is technically prohibitory. That, starting with no building, structure, or land, it's my understanding that that is not prohibitive.
I guess it's
It
like,
sounds it, but it's not.
does this, I mean, it would be great to hear the building commissioner perspective, like,
Yeah, I know.
does this really change your way of approaching
Right.
things significantly? And my impression is that it probably wouldn't, but.
Anything else from the board? Any comments from the public? And seeing none? Okay, so I guess somebody wants to make a motion to recommend this to FinCom?
I make a motion to move Article 4 zoning amendment related to prohibitive uses to FinCom, forward to FinCom.
And is there a second?
second.
And any further discussion?
Can we get an opinion from the building commissioner? on this
That's,
article? Just to see what his thoughts on it would be? Or would that be, does Brian need to send an email to him?
So Abby can request an opinion from him, but you won't have it before you get to the, before you meet again, when you meet with the FinCom. So I don't know that it would affect your action, but we could certainly ask what his opinion is.
yeah.
I think that would be that would be a helpful thing, because I think it's all about, is this really going to change the way we process things? And, I was, I'm kind of on the fence on this because but it seemed pointless, but I'll say send it on to FinCom, but I'd like to hear a real
Yeah.
definitive answer as to whether this is going to make any difference in the way things are handled.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I am concerned about the unintended consequences. I think that's come up recently with what do we, by doing this, what can the consequences be? So I think that's a good idea. So we could still vote on it tonight and then hear from him and then, okay. So,
We already made the motion in a second.
so I believe that there was already a motion in a second. Any additional discussion on top of what Deb's request was? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? So that's 4-0. Thank you for asking the building commissioner also. And so Article 5, so this is Morrison Park and Fields, to see if the town will vote to approve certain amendments to the zoning bylaw and official zoning map affecting the approximately 3.06 acre parcel containing 440, 470, and 480 Washington Street, which is shown on Assessor's Map 23 and Lot 216, and commonly referred to as Morrison Park and Field as follows, or take any other action related thereto. So it's to remove the said parcel from the overlay district FMUOD 6, so that the said parcel, including the Morrison Park, including basketball court, baseball field, DPW facilities, snack shack, softball field, and parking lot, remains within the local business B district and remains within the wireless communications overlay district. Yeah, so what we had discussed over the last few months is that this zoning had changed, and then through the discussions determined that one, to put the zoning back to the way it was prior to the change, and the other aspect to that is that the feeling that this would make the parcel less desirable to build on. I don't think anybody wants to get rid of Morrison Park, so this was identified during a review of the current zoning as a potential change. So if any board member wants to speak, Dave, Deb, anybody wants to chime in?
Well, I would say that I don't think it's necessary because of the fact that the town owns the property, and if there were a use that was different and desired, the zoning would have to be changed. You'd need the 2/3 vote. And same way with when Islington Center was being developed, there were articles that went along with that to deal with the zoning of the tailor shop and whatnot. So anything that's going to change this field is going to need a 2/3 vote at town meeting. Even if this were passed, they could have a vote at town meeting to change it again.
Yeah.
It requires that 2/3 to get past that. Plus, the select board's going to talk about, following this discussion, there's a more permanent solution to this that would really lock down the field as a recreational use. And so I think that is the way to go, and I think that this could be, isn't necessary to go through this.
Sure.
You need to look at it in terms of like the definitions, starting out in baby steps, make it less attractive to developers. If the town were to sell it, then it's more attractive to have housing, and versus just being built under the local business B. And Article 97 is going to take a while to go through. I'm all for Article 97. But I think it would be the final step after possibly changing the zoning to LBB. But that's my opinion.
Thank you. Bill, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I just think it was probably a mistake when they moved it over to the FMUOD, and I think it should be changed back. It does make sense that it's in that district. So.
Yeah, and it does, I also support Article 97 also. Just, I do see this more like a two-prong approach, where you have, it can shore it up a little bit more. But I agree with you with, when you go to town meeting, if the town agreed to sell the parcel for whatever reason, then it would be packaged, I would think it would be packaged in such a way that members would also agree with the change of the zone. But I don't want to see Morrison Park go, so I just think it's a simple way to shore it up. Any other comments from the board before we open it up to the public? So anybody from the public? Oh, sure.
May I make a brief presentation?
Oh, of course, yeah.
First, I want to clarify a couple of things. The local business district B zoning already exists. It didn't get removed, so just for the
that's
public
true.
to understand. And the overlay district was applied to the area. This property was included intentionally. It was not by accident. So it was the Morrison Park and the fire station property were all on one parcel. And as I said at the Finance Commission meeting, back when we were trying to determine where to locate the Islington Fire Station, when we were looking at building a new station, because that one was completely inadequate, and we looked at many locations, one of the possibilities at that time was actually the corner where CVS is now. Now, that would have required an awful lot of work, and we evaluated different locations based on many criteria. And having that thought in mind, we didn't know what was going to happen with the corner of where the fire station was before and now is. So it was intentional to have it in the overlay district. When the fire station was developed, it was divided out as a separate parcel. So now we do have the parcel of Morrison and the ancillary parking lot, snack shack, et cetera. So now what do we do with it? If the goal is to protect it as best we can, almost permanently, Article 97 is an alternative. Taking away the overlay district zoning does still leave it a local business B. You've already established that. So there are two options. The Select Board has taken one of our miscellaneous articles and populated it with a proposal to establish the property under Article 97. But what this says is not the entire parcel, that it would include, under 97, Morrison Park, Little League Field, the softball field, and the basketball courts. And putting it under a 97 protection is really a protection of recreational space. It's a state article. It's a state, I think it's in the, I'm not sure if it's a charter for the state, but it's a state level opportunity. And it maintains the land under its recreational use. So it's nearly impossible, not completely impossible, and I'll get to that, to ever take it out, okay? So what we're saying is we do not think the Morrison Park Snack Shack, where the DPW garage is, the parking area, or where the cell tower is that is dressed up to look like a flagpole should be included. And we want to be able to continue to repair all those properties. There is talk about building a new snack shack, for instance. We don't want to be restricted on those elements of that site. So the discussion is not narrowly focused, but specifically focused on the recreational field space. Once it's Article 97, here's what has to happen to take that away. And I liken it to if you have land in conservation. In this case, you'd have to have unanimous vote from the Recreation Commission, 2/3 vote at town meeting, and then go to the state legislature and need 2/3 vote in both houses of government at the state level. Now, if there had been federal funding applicable to acquiring this, that might apply. I don't think item number 4 applies, but this is what would be on websites regarding Article 97. And you'd have to comply with EOEA, Environmental Office of Environmental Affairs, et cetera. So their executive office, excuse me. There are a number of things you would have to do. And if you read further into it, in getting that agreement, you'd probably have to put a like amount of land into recreation at the same time. So it is a cumbersome process. When you do it with the intent of protecting it. So what we have here is the proposed land would be specifically identified, and the warrant article reads, to see if the town would designate a parcel of land as being under the custody and control of the Recreation Commission, and that said property will be designated as Article 97 lands for the purposes of recreational playing fields. And to the point made earlier, this can be adopted right away. There is no time lag to do this. So we brought this to the Finance Commission last week. You may have watched. It was a very good discussion. Some people wondering if indeed we need to go through this level of care. But we just submit to you that this would be the better way to go to protect it if indeed that's what the town would like to do.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay?
Nancy, do you know statistically the number that have been submitted for 97, Article 97, and those that have been approved?
No, I don't, and it's actually very difficult to find out what properties are under Article 97. At least in my review and in talking about this, we don't really know. Okay, so we don't know, but it's still here. It does exist. I mean, people do protect recreational properties around the state. And you can understand the state does want to preserve, it's an open space type concept, recreational facilities, properties. So, but I cannot give you any information on any statistics, any data on it.
And we don't know what will happen to the snack shack?
What do you mean we
Since it's
don't
not-
know?
It's not included. Is that just stays maintained by the town?
Right, it's still town property. We just want to be able to do things,
months.
and being recreation,
Yeah, they
we
might.
don't want to tie ourselves so tightly that we
reject
can't
because
do
it's a
Oh, I
maintenance
see what
work.
you're saying. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because there is talk about replacing it, and parking lots sometimes need to be replaced, and we want the DPW building. So we just felt that those would be ancillary and should be kept outside the scope of this.
Yeah, it's smart. I fully support this article. I think it's great.
Oh, I agree. I think
We all learn
That's
about
great.
what the options are. I think Mr. Walsh brought that to our attention, and Mr. Ahern, so anyway, that's what we're proposing.
It's
Thank
great. Are there any more questions for, we obviously don't need to, that's not a co-sponsor, so there's no vote needed for that.
No, it might impact your vote on your vote.
Okay.
So just one quick question, one more. If it needs a unanimous vote by the rec department, will you be doing that before town meeting?
it out.
That's to get rid of it.
Once that goes through the state process, I think.
That list of, are we back there, Abby?
Oops, sorry.
That's if, once it's on an article, once it's Article 97 land.
Oh,
If
okay.
50 years from now, Town of Westwood said, different plan, the world has changed, what do they have to go through? Step number 1 is to get the Recreation Commission in Westwood to agree unanimously, and then go through the other steps. So not now, but in the future.
So Debbie, starting with you, how do you feel about supporting more the planning board article that had been discussed for the last couple of months and supporting that? Do you see them as a mutually exclusive, or what's your?
In a way, I don't know. We don't know how long it would take. I'm hearing that it's not going to take long. If it is a long period of time, I would see them as mutually exclusive. But if it's
Yeah.
not, then obviously 97 would trump
Yeah, I agree.
Morrison Park, so.
Because the other question that I have is, they could help each other at town meeting, and then they might also compete or confuse. Is there any idea on the timing of Article 97? And
Chairman, if you'd like.
yes,
I've had conversations with the DCR in Boston about this.
okay,
what we'd have to do if this passes is we're going to have to record the Article 97 protection with the deed. Once I believe it's recorded with the deed, it's essentially in place at that point in time. I've agreed to show them my final draft warrant article to make sure they're okay with it, so that we've got a blessing like going forward. So I don't know what your definition of long is, but I think it would pass at town meeting, get ready for it to record, let the Attorney General review it if they so choose, then record it. I think in theory, next fall, it could be protected.
And I think it's smart that you took out those parcels that may affect, like the cell tower and
so
that shack.
you can make any, and I've already gotten correspondence from them, you can make any change. I had a lengthy discussion, and God forbid me, what if baseball is no longer popular? It broke my heart as I asked the question. But they said as long as it's in furtherance of recreation. So if there's some game being invented right now that becomes the rage and for summer for kids and young adults in our neighborhood, we can change the fields over.
And then what about is there a financial hit to applying for this? Like, is there, like, as far as
Such
well,
as?
the parcels are already zoned. We already know what the parcels
Owned by
are,
the town.
so you don't have to do any
We're not paying any taxes for
surveying or
ourselves
anything
on
like
it.
that.
Well, we're gonna have to do a survey so I can have a specific property description to be able to attach to the deed, but that's already been ordered.
Yeah. 'Cause
And the snack shack's supposed to be renovated, so I wanted to take that out. I saw a case where, I think it was in North Adams, where the snack shack was included in the recreational facilities. I might be wrong about the town, but they included it. I thought it was wise and recommended to the Board of Selectmen, they agreed, to pull it out. Let us use our discretion on that moving forward. That's supposed to be renovated, and you're supposed to get, it's been plumbed for bathrooms. They're supposed to have bathrooms down there as well.
Yeah, because I think Article 97 is the answer. And I would hate for the planning board article. I think it came from a good place, but I don't want it to compete with this.
Oh, I agree, and I think if this is coming to town meeting, I didn't realize it gets voted on right now at town meeting.
It can.
And then we go from there to get the legislation approval and whatnot.
Yep, it can. No legislative approval, only legislature approval if
Oh.
some
If you wanted
future
to
body
change it,
wants to
yeah,
pull
yeah.
it out.
Slow
I'll be
night
long
tonight.
gone by then. We have put two other articles in my time in town, in conservation. I believe it was Article 97, when we bought the Stryer lands in Lowell Woods. They bought 128. The federal government came to us with a grant of $300,000. We had a special town meeting. We put both those properties in conservation to get that grant. Those can't be pulled out unless we go through the same thing. So there's considerable acreage. I think we call it the town forest now. And it can be used for, trails and the things that we have down there.
So is this going to be a town meeting article?
It is, it's
Okay,
scheduled to
great.
be. And we presented it at the FinCom
great.
for initial reaction several
Great
weeks ago.
work getting this done quickly.
And Michael Walsh from the Select Board, just to make a clarification here. Mrs. Walsh brought it to my attention, who brought it to me to bring it to the Select Board. So I just want to be
excellent.
clear and give credit where credit is due.
All right, great. So I'd rather do Article 97.
Oh, I would absolutely rather
Sure.
do 97,
So should we just make it,
as long as it's.
so I guess if there's no
voted
motion for Morrison, then or do we motion to withdraw it?
I would make a motion to request that the article be withdrawn from the warrant.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
And any further discussion? Is there any public comment before we move forward? Seeing no public comment and no further discussion, all those in favor of withdrawing it?
on.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so Marson Park Planning Board article is withdrawn. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
So the next item, I believe, is the article, noted as Article 6, zoning amendment relative to firearms, explosive sales, and services, to see if the town will vote to approve certain amendments to the zoning bylaw to the table of principal uses affecting section 4.1.5.41, firearms/explosive sales and services as follows, or take any other action in relation thereto. So the planning board met and we discussed this. I think what prompted this was an issue in Dedham, similar but not identical. These shops, they require to have, what committee? It's to review and approve a building of this anyway, so the Board of Appeals. So we looked and we saw that there were 4 zones, and what the planning board is suggesting is removing 2 of the zones, local business A and local business B, so that's High Street and Washington. Part of the discussion had to do with whether or not the Attorney General would be in support of this type of item, so that may or may not occur. So that could get rejected or accepted that way. I don't have any further comments for this. Deb, did you want to start?
I don't have any comments.
Bill, do you have any questions or comments? No. And Dave, do you have any questions or comments?
Nope.
If there are any questions or comments from the public or staff, seeing none. So if somebody wants to make a motion,
Make a motion to move Article 6 zoning amendment relative to firearms, explosive sales and services forward to FinCom.
Second?
so we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained. So that is 4-0. And I believe that concludes the zoning article amendments.
And then I recommend continuing the hearing to Monday, the 2nd at 7 PM at the library in the community meeting room. That's where you'll go and participate in the Finance and Warrant Commission's hearing.
Okay. So does somebody want to make a motion to continue the hearing?
Yep.
So, Deb?
I make a motion to continue the hearing to
It's March 2nd
March 2nd,
at the library.
the library, at
Second
7
library, yeah.
PM.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, so the hearing will be continued. And that concludes the zoning amendment public hearing. So next on the agenda is other business. So I guess minutes to review.
Only the November 19th and December 10th were in your packets.
Thank you for joining. Okay. And did everybody have a chance to review the minutes?
Yeah.
Today is the
There you go.
25th. So if we look at November 19th, I only had one comment here, and that was on page 3 of 8. At the top, it says Mr. DeLay left the meeting, and I didn't know if that needed to be a little bit further down. Because there's under staff and board comments, there is a statement by Mr. DeLay, so I don't know if you wanted
Okay.
to move it.
Okay, so we'll
Yeah, just to
keep
move
it there in the
down.
beginning as present, and then, where was it? And then when
Or you
he
could even
left?
just say Mr. DeLay left the meeting.
Oh, on
during-
page 3, sorry, I didn't see it, okay.
During the hearing. Or just move it down. Before public comments. Yeah.
Do you see it?
Oh, right there.
Yeah, I see it, okay. So, yes, I'll move it down till after that, okay.
Okay, great, thank you. Dave, do you have any comments on the November 19 minutes?
Nope.
Deb, do you have any comments on the November 19 minutes?
Yeah, so on page 2, under a comment by me.
And do you want to, your microphone is sort of
Oh,
tilted out.
sorry. On page 2, on a comment that I had made, it's all in capitals, which seems like I was screaming. I didn't say all districts.
Okay. so just-
And I also said, or could we call out the districts that are being selected? That's okay. I just want to make sure that people don't think I'm
Right, right,
screaming.
right.
And then the other thing I thought was a little important was that the minutes are supposed to indicate the main points. And I think that the main points that was stressed throughout the minutes were that there were concerns about changing the residential areas, low-rise buildings, 2- and 3-family houses, and smaller lots. And that's really, I didn't see that anywhere in these minutes, but if you go
So
back
you're
to.
speaking of the housing production plan?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe that's something that can just be added as a general, or I guess under board comments, discussions? Or do you, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Those aren't ones I made, but when you go back and look at the meeting, those were pretty prevalent. They were, repeated by several members. But, let's see. And that, I think, was about it.
Yeah, and this is the meeting that it was approved.
so, do you know, did you get it? So, to,
clarify?
what to be added, we could say the board discussed, or the board had concerns, the board
Regarding, what was it?
concerns.
The change in residential areas, increase in low-rise building, 2- and 3-family homes, and smaller lots.
Okay.
And that is all I have for comments.
Bill, do you have any comments on the November 19th?
No, I don't know if we can get the minutes sooner. In other words,
How soon?
they're just,
Well, Jessica gets them very soon.
it's hard to
Yeah.
remember that far back, that's why I'm just, I'd like to have them while I'm fresh in my mind, but I didn't know if we could get them any sooner. That was all my,
Okay.
not this particular, but just in general.
And then the next set of minutes is Tuesday, December 10th. Deb, do you have any comments to
Yeah,
this?
the only thing, and it was probably my mistake, we don't have an affordable housing trust fund, we have an account. And that was on page 3 of 8, so maybe I said it, I didn't watch
Okay.
it.
Okay, so we just change it to account.
Yeah, we don't have a fund. Wait, yes. No, right, no, we don't have a trust, we just have an affordable housing account, we don't have a
Oh,
trust.
trust fund, okay, yep.
So remove trust.
Okay.
Yeah, so and then so on page 1, under staff comments, so I think it's important to document, this is where staff comments, the end of the first sentence where it says, has submitted a request to withdraw the application, I would add as submitted without prejudice. I went back to this
Okay.
meeting to listen to it, so that was
Okay.
to make that distinction. And then for the board comments and discussions, I had a lot of comments to this, where the first thing I would do is, I think even, it actually starts with Mr. Atkins, but it's actually Mr. Path, who wrote the first one. And what I would do is I would separate out, I I would almost do a separate line for Mr. Path, Mr. Atkins. Then I would do a separate one, which it looks like for Ms. Conant, a separate paragraph for Mr. DeLay, and a separate line for Mr. Gorman. And when I went back and listened to it, and then I read this, it doesn't read the same as how I heard it. And so, I guess in the interest of time, this is an important part of that meeting, so I would just go back to that Westcat, and then just, sort of add some text and change some of the text.
Do you have specific suggestions, or?
Yeah, I have a lot. So I could send you recommendations, and it's kind of, I have arrows going in a couple different places. Do you want me to send you a
Okay.
track change?
Probably send them for next, and then we can review them in the next meeting? Yeah.
Yes, why don't I do that? Is that okay that I do?
Yes.
Is it a Word file?
Yeah, I could send you, yes, I can send you
Great.
that.
Yeah, that'll save time. And I don't think I have any other comments.
Okay, so the December ones will be continued to your next meeting.
December 10th, yeah. Okay,
Question, just because we're doing this.
sure.
In the beginning, you mentioned to please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. And
Yeah.
then we're not enforcing it, so I don't know how you want me to
Oh.
handle that.
So the way that
Because I know you questioned it when we were at the library that night, and I've always been told to do it, and you say
leave it there. I received further guidance, just, that
I
it's.
just don't know how to handle it, like, do I, like, I
Yeah,
don't,
we
sorry, I
should-
don't know your
I'm-
name, do I?
I see.
I
For
know,
the record.
I know Mrs. Fusco, I don't know
Oh.
if you don't want me to write your name for the record. So
Well-
that's what I'm saying, I don't know how to handle that.
I
guess that's a
I would
question.
Normally,
go
we
with the
should-
guidance from-
The Inspector General says you don't have to do it.
Well, our practice has been to
Yeah.
I
do
know,
it,
I'm
so
just saying the
we,
And that's
Inspector.
what
So
Brian
I'm not,
said.
So
I'm
we
not gonna
should-
give a
if we rem-
recommendation, but
if you
feel like
notice it,
asking,
yeah.
you can ask
Yep.
for the name.
I don't feel, yeah, I
or
just,
I
I
can-
never
or I
feel
can
I'm allowed
ask-
to talk. That's-
we could, we just didn't notice at the time, so we can just
That
say,
is-
do you mind identifying yourself for the
Thank you
record?
Oh, okay.
for
Do you mind
bringing that
identifying
up.
yourself? Okay. Yeah,
Normally,
'cause I just
people
don't.
do say that. Tonight, they didn't. I could have asked.
Right, I mean, yeah, because, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so for
I
this.
know who you are and where you live.
Thank you. That's a good question.
Okay.
So upcoming meetings, so we have a FinCom meeting on Monday.
Wait,
Are
did
we
they,
voting on the minutes for
or
the
did you vote for
19th?
19th, November
November
19th
19th.
minutes, as amended?
As amended.
Yes, so I make a motion to approve the November 19 minutes as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, so that's 4-0. The December 10th minutes will
Wait. till
Correct.
next
wait
week.
for the next meeting. So then just going over, so next Monday, we have a meeting, and then on Wednesday, we have a meeting.
Yep.
And Tuesday is a placeholder if FinCom continues.
Yes, but I think they're really going to try to finish on Monday night because Tuesday's the primary.
Oh, okay,
Um,
okay.
So generally, don't want to have meetings.
And so we have one fewer warrant
Yes.
article
Yep,
to present.
So that's at the library at 7?
yes.
Okay.
Wednesday's here at 6,
7 o'clock on Wednesday.
Wednesday, 7.
7?
Right. How does it look for St. Patrick's Day, how heavy is that meeting?
You have the Brigham and Women's proposal, so you'll have the Brigham and Women's second. So you approved the project as a whole, the site plans, but you had a condition that when they have the final design plans, architectural details, for them to come back to you. So that's on for
That's
March
building,
17th.
building,
That's the addition and the parking garage,
great.
the phase 2.
So their presentation's quite long.
Yeah.
from before.
That was your first meeting, I think, and then the group home
continuation.
from earlier tonight.
Okay.
And then 2 earth material movements.
Okay, so it'll be a busy night.
Maureen Stapleton, 193 School Street, sorry to be late. I just wanted to say, the Brigham and Women's card that came, that a lot of residents got, is the same night as the FinCom meeting. So I did call them and make them aware, because I did want to go to that. They're having an expansion meeting,
Oh, okay,
what Fran was talking about.
okay.
So
I
it's the
don't- I don't know
same
what kind of
time.
details they're gonna, you can call them up and make your decision. I would go to FinCom.
Right, but I also wanted to know, so I did call the director today. She's going to give me a call back.
Yeah. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The meeting is adjourned.